Good afternoon again, everyone. My name is Renee Robinson. I'm the industry programmer here at TIFF, and thank you for joining us for part 2. This is the afternoon session of the Creative Process Day. As you know, we've been talking all about creativity, and we have a stellar lineup continuing throughout the afternoon. I'll do a quick introduction. We have, as moderator, is Steve Gatos, executive editor of Variety. It's a pleasure to have you, and I have to say that Steve actually requested this particular panel. I'd sent him a list of options and said, Steve, pick one. Or actually, pick two, Steve, pick two. And he requested this one, so I think this is definitely an area of interest, and we're very pleased to have you here for this one. Directly to his right is Dan Janvey, and Dan is the producer of Beasts of a Southern Wild. And then we have Mark Woollen, who is our special guest today, founder and director of Mark Woollen and Associates. And as we have known him as the trailer guru, that's who he's been monikered for. And then we have Sohini Sengupta, who is the VP of Interactive Media at Mark Woollen and Associates. And we're in for quite a treat today. We have Sohini working with Mark internally, Dan working with Mark externally, and Steve as our esteemed moderator and knower of all things trailers. So Steve, I'm going to hand over to you, and I think we have a clip, but I'll let you take that on.
Okay. Do we want to look at the clip quickly and then we'll start talking? Or? I think everybody has seen all of these, but it's a nice refresher to see what marvelous work we're talking about.
And I think we're going to play Beasts of the Southern Wild.
Good. Well, I should explain that as you were told, that I chose this panel, and I think it's the direct result of working at Variety the last 6 or so years with our senior film critic Peter DeBruge, who came into Variety as a worshiper of the making of trailers. And when you work alongside someone who's knowledgeable and passionate, it becomes kind of infectious. I already was fascinated and was interested and liked them, and I think year upon year we just got into dialogue about them, and it's really caused me to be aware of it. The other thing is the recognition over the last couple of decades that there are great young filmmakers, and if no one goes to see their first film, they may not get a second film, and so part of the specialty film business is getting people to see movies. Otherwise, great talents don't get chances to make movies. So there's a whole intersection, a whole bunch of reasons that, and I think it's the same reason this is a packed room, that people are have a very passionate, strong interest. Mark, let's just start. I was reading a little bit about your background, and it's always interesting to hear that someone was a teenager and put their mind on something that maybe a lot of teenagers wouldn't be focused on. Is that accurate that you focused on this early in your life?
Yeah, I was always interested in putting videos together as a kid with friends and kind of putting images together and images with music and telling short stories. And so that kind of started with a really early interest in editing, and that became then kind of an opportunity to really pursue that with a lot of energy. And I got an opportunity to begin trailer editing and kind of learning that craft at a very young age. I think it was about probably 19, and I was working for a company that did a lot of trailers for the Walt Disney Company, and it was just something I was excited about.
And where did you grow up?
In Los Angeles.
In LA. And so you started sort of interning or just working at a trailer company?
Yeah, I originally started editing. The high school that I went to had a TV production program, and so I did that all through high school, and then got a job kind of in summer time and after school at a house that was kind of putting together documentaries, and worked on shows like America's Most Wanted and documentaries on everything from Hemingway to Carl Jung to everything kind of in between. And then kind of saw an ad, honestly, in Variety at the time.
There we go.
That was a company that was looking for a trailer editor, and so I kind of went in and had a reel and would work cheap and had lots of energy, and started learning the craft.
What role did you play on the trailer for Beauty and the Beast?
That was, the company that I worked for did a lot of animated work for Disney, and so Beauty and the Beast was one of the first trailers that I got to work on in a major way. And then that led me to a job at Universal, which then led to some opportunities. One of the first trailers I did there was Schindler's List, which was a big kind of opportunity for me. And again, that came down to a very kind of simple thing of just finding those images that kind of connected to me in an emotional way with a single piece of music. And some of those kind of things are still kind of part of the technique that I still apply today.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to, because this is an industry crowd, and I work for an industry publication, and we have industry experts, I'd like to kind of burrow into the process a little bit and the business side of it. I discovered along the way that music rights for trailers is a whole arc. I'm getting exactly the reaction I was hoping. Please take your mic and tell us why you're laughing. When I mention music rights in trailers, Mark's partner starts to chuckle, and there's a reason.
I'm only chuckling because it's actually a very crucial part of the process that I don't think people realize. So if you're a filmmaker and you're optioning rights for your film, and sometimes it's important to look at it from a marketing perspective, because on the flip side of it, if we are using a piece of music from your feature into our trailer, that's a whole separate additional cost, and it can be anywhere from a few thousand to 100,000.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that that you're aware of once you're in the process, but not aware of when you're starting.
And what I don't know or understand is why the publishers are able to jump on the opportunity of a trailer and take that money home. What is that about?
That I have no idea. It's just an extra easy way to kind of
Make a whole bunch of
make
money.
a whole bunch of more money.
So.
I think it's fair, though. I mean, we're burrowing deep into the economics of the business, but
That's what we're here for.
These are essentially being used to market and make money for someone, so it makes sense that the music industry.
I think you're right when it comes to score and all that kind of stuff. I think where it gets murky is artists who are already on the fringes of making tons of money outside of it.
I definitely agree about them not making more.
Yeah.
I mean, we were fortunate in the case of Beast to have a fantastic score to work with, and actually that piece in the trailer that you just saw actually was kind of customized for the trailer specifically, because it had some great themes, but there was kind of an energy that was kind of specific to what we needed for the trailer. And so we actually worked with the director Ben his composing team to kind of customize a piece specifically for the trailer.
Right. No, I think, Dan, you make a good point that the trailer, I think the publishers see the trailer as a commercial. And commercial rights are different than film rights, where you may give a filmmaker an opportunity to put a little something in their piece of art, but this is a different kind of commerce. Talking about the people who are involved in making a trailer, there is the craftsmanship and the artistry of your team, but then there's the filmmakers, and then there is who else? Tell us, you know, if we can, in a fairly concise way, can you tell us who, like, we'll use Beast because we have opportunity here, who all gets involved in the process?
It really is a collaboration between our agency, the studio's marketing department, and the filmmakers. And on every film, that relationship, the balance of that kind of shifts depending on the maybe the filmmakers and the studio's relationship. I don't know. We never get final cut ourselves, you know, as the agency. But with Beasts, we were working with Dan and Ben and Fox Searchlight, who is, you know, extremely collaborative with filmmakers. And so I feel like that was a good combination of kind of all three parties, you know, having equal weight kind of on the trailer.
Are there ever other voices in addition to the ones you mentioned? Do the studios sometimes have yet another outside marketing apparatus?
Well, certainly, depending on the film, can be a strong research component to movie marketing. So that's the studios hiring a research firm that, you know, trailers are tested, and they're kind of tested in groups, you know, similar to this size, and that data is then kind of used sometimes in figuring out kind of some of the marketing plan for the film and for, you know, maybe what ends up in a trailer or not and what people are responding to. But how that research is used really kind of depends on, is individual to each film. You might say that larger studio films may rely a little bit more on that research, where independents may not as much. So again, it's kind of just another tool, and I think that's how it's best used, is not as kind of gospel, but as a tool to kind of figure out what's working and what's not.
Can you put that in kind of chronological order? Like, we know that films are tested, and they're tested at the point there's a cut. And, you know, most directors don't have final cut, and most films are tested, I think it's fair to say. How does that work with trailers?
I mean, honestly, we come into the process at all kinds of different spaces. It's not unusual for us. Right now, we're working on something where we just have a script, and the film hasn't even been cast, but we're kind of working on a first teaser concept. Sometimes the film is still being shot with dailies, and we're working on a trailer. And then sometimes, more often than not, we have some sort of a rough cut of the film that we're working on. And then, in terms of when does the testing process come in specifically?
Yes, that would be interesting.
I would say usually we'll kind of do our process of coming up with kind of some initial concepts, present that to the studio, go back and forth with notes, you know, that can go on for maybe several weeks. The filmmakers are then likely introduced with their input, and then maybe that testing process begins. Or sometimes the testing process begins even before it's sent to the filmmakers. The studio kind of wants to know what they're presenting, and that they can stand behind that work and what their choices are.
Yeah, it really depends on the studio and the project. Sometimes it's a week into it, and other times it's 6 months into it.
And how much back and forth, or how long would the process, in general terms, if it's possible, of testing? In other words, do you test it and then recut and test and recut and test and recut, or is it sometimes one test and you're off to the races?
Again, depending on the scale of the film. I don't even recall with Beasts if anything was tested.
No, I was just going to say, Beast wasn't tested.
It was a film that just kind of, I think everyone responded to. Certainly we did in the studio initially, with just kind of, you know, loving the film and just a kind of certain emotional reaction to it. And I think we all kind of just trusted our instincts and kind of worked together on it, but it wasn't something that was heavily market researched at all.
And if you're talking about testing business side, it's expensive too.
Yeah, that's right.
To test, so it depends
Good
on
point.
the studio
Yeah.
again.
And we're talking about specialty films. It's important to note, read an interview with you, and you identified your area that you like working in, which is what we call the fall films, the specialty films. Can you kind of elaborate on that and why that is?
Yeah, we tend to work on a lot of Oscar-type films, director-driven films. We're working on a number of films that are here at Toronto, 12 Years a Slave, Dallas Buyers Club, Rush, and we have another number of other films that will continue to be kind of opening up in the fall. Honestly, it's really just kind of the movies that I respond to and that I like. And I feel really fortunate to kind of work on things that are movies that I would go to see and that I understand and get. So those are typically kind of a lot of the films that we like to work on.
And can I say from a filmmaker side, that's an extremely important thing that filmmakers know. So when filmmakers, at every single step of our process, the starting point is, does this person understand what we're doing? Mm-hmm. And when you look at your trailers, it's clear that, and I think your name often gets associated with everything you do, but you have multiple people working on the trailers, mm-hmm. right? But the Woollen brand or the company, it's clear when you see these, there's a deep understanding of what these movies are. And I know that, so it's like you can tell this company likes the films they work on, and that's very appealing for filmmakers.
It's kind of like what you do, Dan. You have a kind of film you want to work on, and others you're not that interested in.
Yeah.
And so people of like mind, yeah.
Yeah, and also when we started working together in the first meeting, Beast is, I love the film, but it's a very bizarre, unusual type of movie. And I remember when we started talking about it, it was clear that you understood the mystery behind it. Mm-hmm. Is that my mic?
I have to move mine away from yours.
Okay. And we like that you had an emotional reaction to it. You really believed it to be a mysterious movie, and I think you understood the sort of genetic code or heartbeat of it in a way that we responded to.
Excuse me. Well, it also raises the question, if you prefer this kind of film and work on it, and you've clearly excelled at this kind of film, what is the difference between doing a trailer for Beast and doing a trailer for Iron Man 3? I mean, what kind of, if one is one kind of animal, what's the other kind?
Right. It's different in terms of just kind of the scope of the marketing campaign, the investment. I think that can kind of affect a lot of decisions. Obviously, when you have a $100 million, $200 million film, there's just different kind of decisions in the number of voices and all those things that kind of go into every part of the process.
Are there more voices in that process?
Yeah, absolutely. I think testing probably plays a larger component. You also have a thing where there's a bigger ad spend, where there's multiple trailers. Just the whole thing is kind of bigger and more complex. And
would you say it's fair to describe it as a bit more industrial?
It's certainly more. It's a bigger system. Like I said, it's really a bigger investment and a lot more
bigger
riding
expectations, box office wise. I think it's the same. I think at the end of the day, you're just trying to do the same thing. You're trying to treat the film the best way possible.
Right.
But it's just a bigger beast.
Right. And you, it sounds like you really want to be personally engaged in the movies you work on, so you have the luxury of choosing the films you want to work on.
Yeah, I think that's where we do our best work,
Right.
is by things that we're excited about, and hopefully it shows in the work. So.
Is the term 4 quadrants something that people toss at you guys, or do they know better than to say that, or is that part of every discussion?
No, they still say that.
Yeah,
What's
no.
that?
They still say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it still applies to films that we work on.
Can you explain? I think most people in the audience know the term, but can you just...
4 quad is basically how they describe the population. It's kind of divided into 4 quads, and that's just age-wise. So it's like 18 to 25 men, women, and then 25 to, is it 45? 25 to 45 men. Yeah, it depends, men and women. And that's how they kind of break it apart of, if a film needs to sell to the first 2 quadrants, it has to be selling to 18 to 25 or 18 to 35 young male, and kind of how that translates. So is your trailer speaking to that quadrant? When trailers are trying to be big, like Iron Man, it's trying to speak to all 4 quadrants, which is where testing comes in a lot. Yeah.
as we said, higher stakes marketing campaigns in the neighborhood of 100 to 150 million dollars. I don't think people recognize that, and interestingly enough, the MPA stopped reporting the marketing cost about 7 years ago. I think it got to a point where they didn't want anybody to talk about it anymore. The beginning of your career, it would seem you would be extremely finely tuned to create things that would reach that young audience, which is a much sought after demographic, as you've been doing this now for about 20 years?
Yeah.
Do you feel that there's a way that you still feel connected to that younger audience? Did that change for you at all, or do you feel the same as you were then, and you have the same eyes and ears in connectivity?
I mean, I certainly, make sure to. There's myself and a company of about 20 of us that, all produce this work and work closely together. So I think, continue to, be inspired, by the team that's around me. And so it's exciting. I worked for many years alone, probably for about 10 years, probably just kind of by myself in a spare bedroom, editing and putting things together. And there was, a certain enjoyment to that, but then it was really great when I kind of started a company and had people around me to kind of collaborate with and everything. So I think that continues to kind of inspire me. It's still fun to see people putting things together and, working on ideas. And yeah, I think in terms of the types of films that we continue to work on, you just kind of have to continue to kind of bring that.
My secret is I have a 17-year-old daughter, and I just listen to her. So I started watching Sherlock from the UK, and Evangelion, and Adventure Time, and all these great things that are just fantastic. So it's really easy to have a focus group in the next bedroom, So.
Yeah, which is something, by the way, that we do. I mean, when we talk about testing, and we do that in a kind of informal version in our office all the time. And I would encourage filmmakers that are putting anything together, if they're trying to put a trailer together on their own, or as they would when they're kind of putting their film together, it always just helps to kind of have that group of people around you that are kind of fresh to it, to just kind of give you that kind of reaction, give you that honest feedback. And we do that with each other, throughout the week.
And Mark, in terms of filmmakers testing trailers, in some ways it's harder. Yeah, I think the challenge with workshopping material, whether you call it testing or workshopping or rough cut screens, whatever, the challenge is always how you gain objectivity and freshness. And I just remember the learning curve that my team had of letting go of some of our preconceptions of the movie.
Right.
Because we spent 3.5 years engineering this to a T, and I remember it was hard for us to understand what this was doing outside of the context of how those individual elements worked in the film.
Yeah,
Right.
no, that's a really good point, because that is, we found a very difficult thing for filmmakers often to put together their own trailers, because for what we end up having to do is kind of be able to disassemble the entire film and kind of decontextualize everything and see it as kind of raw material, again, to kind of build the trailer from, not to build the film from. And so there's lots of things that are connections of things that mean something within the course of the film, whether it's a joke or a character moment,
Or a
which
shot,
doesn't
yeah.
translate in a trailer. It's a completely different form. So it's helpful to have someone outside the film often who can kind of take the film apart, put it together, and put it back together again in a slightly different form.
I mean, we have to do that within our own office, where we all fall in love with the film like beasts, and it's hard for us to step back at times, which is why it's good to have other people involved, because if you've been working on it for 6 months, you're like, no, you can't lose that shot. That's the best shot in the movie. But you have to sort of step back and...
We had a very funny, because I think people, that response of, this is the best shot in the movie, it has to be in there. We had the opposite problem. I don't know if you remember this. We were like, you can't put that shot in the trailer. and
Because it was the best shot, or?
I think part of it has to do, I mean, first of all, I think it's an emotional thing.
But I mean, you can't put it in because you don't want to reveal it, or you can't put it in, okay.
I mean, I think part of the reason Beast works is it surprises you at every turn. And especially in the third act of the film, it sort of goes on this journey, starting when Hush Puppy leaves for Elysian Fields. And I just remember it's like, we're devoting our lives to surprising the audience here. And that was a really emotional process for us. And the aurochs, which are if anyone hasn't seen it, they're these prehistoric beasts who are unfrozen out of the ice caps who come and destroy Hush Puppy. If you haven't seen it, that must not make any sense. But I remember it was a big thing, how much of the aurochs do we put in the trailer? And Ben would fight to the death to cut frames from that.
Yeah.
I remember,
Right.
yeah.
Well, in addition to being a terrific producer, Dan, you also read minds, because I was about to ask about the role of the filmmaker. You know, there's a saying that a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. Is the filmmaker sometimes the ally and sometimes not the best friend to the maker of the trailer?
I mean, honestly, I think some of our best work has been when we've had good collaborations with filmmakers. We're able to kind of establish our work, and then, I mean, they know their film better, than anyone. So I find that we often get kind of really invaluable kind of input into moments and how things are put together. But yeah, depending on the filmmaker, there sometimes is a little bit of I always feel for filmmakers the first time that they kind of see their films kind of put into a different context, because it's got to be kind of
Sometimes it's jarring.
a trip. Yeah.
You had cited in one interview Kubrick's trailers, and there's a mythology around what Kubrick did, and there's a reality. What is your understanding of the reality of a Kubrick trailer, and did he do everything, or did he work with somebody to make those? Or? I'm coming around to somebody contemporary that I'm going to ask you about, not by name.
Yeah, honestly,
I know
who you're
thinking.
talking about.
I was going to bring him up too.
It's a hip room.
okay. I don't know if I know. I'm the only one not in the know on who
In
that
the
is.
context of Mark, I know who you're talking
I do
about.
too. Okay.
Okay.
But so without speaking too much in code here, did Kubrick really? Because Kubrick, had so much control in reality over so much of the marketing.
Sure.
Way back when, in a way that I think some filmmakers would like to emulate that, or they just are in sync with that idea of, I want to control the marketing. I know that it is jarring for the people who do film marketing outside of the trailer work. That's why I want to talk a little bit about filmmakers getting so far into the marketing, whether or not it just becomes like unwieldy at some point or not.
Yeah, I mean, with his, again, talking
Well,
about
the first
Kubrick
question was
specifically,
about
honestly, I know about some of his collaborations with Pablo Ferro on some of those early pieces, but I honestly don't know the
Well,
history behind that.
what made you admire the Kubrick trailers? What was the quality about them?
It's really just, it's interesting because we go back from time to time if we're working on a film and try to kind of look at other films that we've loved in the past and see if there's any kind of interesting reference points, or how did they handle this in a certain situation. And it's funny, they very rarely hold up because it feels like the trailers have kind of evolved a lot, especially maybe in the last 10 years in terms of pacing and sophistication of editing and everything like that. Except for, I feel like I can go back and look at almost any of the Kubrick trailers, and those are the ones that continue to impress me for feeling kind of still kind of fresh and alive and not stodgy and everything like that. So I think that there's just a lot about his films and the commercials for his films that excite me. The boldness, the originality.
They still feel provocative and fresh, interestingly enough.
Yeah. There's a strong feeling, and I mean that's the thing that we're always trying to kind of communicate in our work, is trying to capture that feeling of the first time that we saw the film and hold on to that and see, can we encapsulate that in 2 minutes and kind of give you an emotional response.
What you just said is filmmaking, and it sort of brings me back to something you said in the beginning, that what you do is just a different form of filmmaking. And so that goal is its own craft of you sort of want the goal of the trailers to be this standalone experience that provides an audience an experience that's both completely new and suggests it's something that they want after seeing it.
Well, going back to that filmmaker whose name we won't reveal, the idea of filmmakers really doing their own trailers, I mean, is that a mythology, or are some filmmakers actually just taking control of the process and making their own trailers?
It probably happens occasionally, but
Happens maybe once a year, right?
yeah, not very often. Again, because often they have the difficult time of kind of separating themselves from the film and being able to understand what works in, not understand so much, but being able to kind of take the film apart the way that we need to and make connections in different ways and tell the story in different ways and not get caught up in the maybe linear progression of how things play out in the movie and everything like that.
So it's really the unique exception, because they're also in charge of like festival strategy and all kinds of things that are driving all kinds of other marketing people crazy. So
Mm-hmm.
that person
Can I
is
defend Filmmakers for 1 second?
please.
Because I think I think the idea that filmmakers are difficult comes up a lot. And the reputation usually comes up to the degree to which they try and control processes. And we have different tolerances for that in different contexts.
By the way, I would argue that they're not difficult enough, but go on.
That's sort of the point I'm making. And it also breeds this mythology, and I think the Kubrick mythology is probably the primary example of this, like in the post-50s on to now era, that these are these guys alone maniacally dictating their vision for the universe. And the truth is that directors like Kubrick, and I'll say his name, directors like David Fincher, they're insanely collaborative people. They have very
I would
little
agree.
patience for the noise around the process, but, and let's say even...
By the way, just to interrupt one point, because you mentioned Fincher. If you have ever been on a commercial shoot, you know that collaboration doesn't even begin to describe it, because there's the folks from the agency standing over the director's shoulder on the shoot. Now, maybe Fincher doesn't have them, maybe he's banished them, but generally, if you come from the world of commercials, you're coming from something that is so collaborative, it's beyond anything relating to film.
And I think the point I'm trying to make, that exacting directors are extremely collaborative people. And whether or not that's a pleasant process or not is a separate conversation.
I mean, from our perspective, we love working with filmmakers, and I think filmmakers come to us specifically because it feels like a safe place. Because as you know, Mark's he sees it from a different perspective. He doesn't see it just from a marketing lens. He'll see the film first, and I think that's how we all see it now. We look at a movie, we see the movie first, and then we create. And it's better to create with the person who actually created the film, who knows it the best. And it's a very collaborative process. So for us, it's great working with filmmakers.
Yeah, well, I think that's what characterizes your work, Mark, is that you're in sync with filmmakers who are making the films that we're here watching at Toronto and in the festivals, and that we're celebrating as an alternative to giant mainstream films that cost $150 million to market. These films have to work on marketing budgets that sometimes are non-existent and sometimes a couple of million, you know. You had mentioned it to Wired. You said that you when you see a trailer, or even just in general, you don't want to know too much about a movie. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's funny because I don't really have, I guess, a memory of watching trailers as a kid very much, and it's obviously, didn't have the internet available to kind of pour over things over and over again. But yeah, I honestly, my best movie experiences are going in knowing as little about a movie as possible. So,
do you watch other folks' trailers?
We'll watch some other trailers just to kind of see if there's, some interesting work happening and kind of see what the other guys are doing in terms of, style or technique or what have you. But I don't think we're looking to other trailers to make good trailers. I think it's kind of looking at the films and trying to figure out, what is unique about this film and making sure that we're kind of getting that.
Do you watch the marketplace and the other trailers just to see what other people are doing?
I do, and I think a lot of people in our office do, just because this is what we do. And I
also,
think
if you love trailers, it's fun to watch them.
It's fun to watch, and there's also admiration between some, it's, oh, wow, that was really good, or I don't know how they did that, but that was great. I think there's respect there, too.
Talking about the collaboration, is there a most surprising ally in the process? Is there someone that people might not think? Dan, you?
The producer.
Fox Searchlight.
Yeah.
For me, it was our first time. I found the studio insanely helpful. They really helped us learn what some of the goals are. What does it mean to actually market a film? And so I was, it's sort of, you don't expect that. You expect to have radically different agendas.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that also, Dan, because often I pay visits over to the Fox Searchlight offices, and one of the times I was over there, I was looking at the one sheets, and it's just like, you guys really have such great taste, because it's the combination of aesthetically really strong, and it works for each movie. When you see, and they, you know, of course they have a run of unbelievably good films that have done really well, but you see Slumdog Millionaire, you see Descendants, you see Little Miss Sunshine, you see these movies, and so there is a consciousness there of the product that they're putting out and how to put it out properly.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
First of all, I think one sheets and trailers are the things filmmakers get the most emotionally attached to.
Yes.
How often are you aware of the one sheet and the other marketing materials in terms of your trailer?
Often they're happening simultaneously. So, but I like to have as much information as possible and kind of know the big picture of the campaign. And I think whenever there can be something that can be unified between the look that you're doing in your one sheet and the look that can be informed in your trailer, I think that's important to kind of try to tie those things together. But yeah, we'll look at those things just to kind of get a general feel for what the other hand is doing.
Can I ask you about one specific movie that I was just told that you worked on the trailer, because I think it's a very small budget film, and it had all kinds of chatter around it. So the trailer process in the middle of that could possibly be interesting. The Canyons.
Yeah, that was a project that we did with IFC, and the trailer process on that was went pretty quickly, actually. I think it was, it was a movie that no one had really seen. I don't think it had screened at any festivals, but there had been a lot written about it.
Right.
And so that was definitely a case of it. We did a very short piece for that was just a minute long, and it was really about continuing to tease what might be contained in the film. I think there was maybe a review or so, but it was really about strong pedigree of the director and of the writer and the cast. And that was definitely one where it was all about a tease. You didn't get much of a story in it. You just kind of got a general feeling.
So the essence of the challenge that you saw when you sat down to deal with that was to do what?
Well, I was excited about that one just because I guess I get excited about projects that just feel like they'll be a little part of the conversation and the culture for a moment or so. And I had read the New York Times article about it, and so much that it just became something that's like, oh, I need to see that. But yeah, the process of that one went pretty quickly. We worked with the studio closely. I think the Filmmakers had really just like a note or so, and then it was kind of out the door. And there's been other things that we spend the better of 6 months to a year on.
Wow.
Or a larger campaign, and that was a very small campaign.
And the key for you on that, you said, was to not reveal,
not reveal was really just to kind of give you a feel of the tone of it, kind of announce the pedigree of the filmmakers involved and the talent involved, and really just kind of try to be provocative about, what is this movie? But it wasn't. It was just about a feeling.
Do you have music in your iPod or someplace that you just keep waiting for that moment? Because I think you'd mentioned that there was one project where you kept the music at, I think it was maybe Social Network.
Social Network, yeah.
Which, by the way, is, I think, one of the greatest trailers I've ever seen in my life. It's a great trailer.
Thank you. I sometimes say that music is often 70-80% of the process for us, because trailers are all about kind of rhythm, and when we can find that right piece of music that kind of gives us that kind of structure and kind of rhythm and leads us through, it can do a lot of the work. And so we're constantly listening to music, new, old, everything in between, kind of collecting it for when the right project is that will bring out a song. And in the case of the Social Network trailer, it was a song that I had come across maybe 5 or 6 years earlier, and just kind of had sitting in my iTunes. And when we first got the project, we only had a very limited amount of footage to work with, which was great, because I kind of love having sometimes limitations. I think we only had maybe about 20 minutes of material to work with on that trailer at first, and so we kind of started sketching out a number of ideas, and that song popped into my head as something that might be an interesting piece to use, because one of the issues we were dealing with initially with that film, we're talking about figuring out, what's special about a movie, or, what the right approach is that question that had been kind of happening around in the blogosphere before the film of how could a movie be interesting about Facebook or about a website, what would that be? And so then that became kind of the mission for the beginning of that trailer, was to kind of introduce people to the emotional connection that they may have, or what their relationship might be with Facebook, and kind of spend the first minute of that trailer with a piece of music and kind of these profiles of Facebook and status updates that we had kind of all filmed in our office. And then the second half of the trailer, which is only like a minute long, is basically made up of some of the best parts of the 25 minutes of footage we had to kind of work with. So the trailer, which is 2.5 minutes, there's only maybe a minute of actual movie in it.
Yeah, it's impressionistic. One last question, but I'm going to let the audience get involved here. Who's on your list of filmmakers? You're such a film lover and a knowledgeable film lover. Who is on your list of filmmakers that you'd just like say, that's the guy, I gotta work on a trailer with this guy? Or woman.
The one who I haven't worked with so far, and I love all of his movies, is P.T. Anderson, who I understand makes a lot of his trailers himself. So I don't know if there's an opportunity there.
It had to slip out.
Yeah. But I think that at the same time, I'm able to go to each one of his movies, fresh and not having seen it a million times before. But yeah, he's definitely on my list.
Does your partner have some folks on your list too?
I really wanted to work on Ritesh Batra's film Lunchbox. Like, he just seems like a great new voice. I'm always interested in international in a very different way.
How much of a chance has your company had on international titles?
It's not that big of a scope, because international is such a different part of the industry, and a lot of times they'll do it internationally or they repurpose domestic. Depends on what it is and what territory it is. Certain territories will make it completely different, and that culturally I don't think crosses over.
Also, it speaks that it starts to get complex too with who owns what rights, and that's a very complicated aspect from producing and distribution end of, because you create the trailer for the U.S. Searchlight only had the U.S., so other territories have the license.
There are very few times where the domestic and the international actually align.
But I actually think, like, from a consumer perspective, just as a fan of foreign films, I think there's tremendous room for innovation of how foreign films are marketed to U.S. audiences.
I agree.
And
that's a very good point.
Yeah, and it's very rare. I think audiences often pick up that they're trying to hide the fact that they're not speaking English. And it's awkward. And a good counterexample is the UK trailer for Rust and Bone, which we talked about last year, actually. And it just has this unbelievable, what's that band, the very popular band, M83? M83?
Yeah.
Yes, M83, and it's like, I have to have that emotional experience. But the language thing seems hard to get around.
Like Slumdog for domestic, totally different than Slumdog for UK. There was much more story and dialogue for UK because language wasn't so much of a barrier.
This is such a critical market for foreign language cinema that if there is a budget to do a domestic trailer, or U.S. trailer rather, it'd be great. Let's get some folks involved. I see the first hand up right there. Can we pass the mic over?
Hi. This question is more for Mark and Sohini. I was wondering if you could comment on a few months back, the group of theater owners approached the studios to ask about making shorter trailers and releasing them closer to release date. If you had a comment on that. And also, side question, whether Cameron Diaz's portrayal in The Holiday is an accurate depiction of what it's like to cut trailers.
I wish. But you could speak. Didn't they also ask about the 2 minutes and 30 second thing?
Yeah, I think that's what you were asking
That's what
about,
you're
is
referring
the limit be 2 minutes.
limitation of it.
Yeah, because currently the maximum length for a trailer is 2.5 minutes. Every studio gets one exemption per year where they can run a trailer that's longer than that. But there had been a conversation about whether trailers should be limited to 2 minutes. And I think some of the questions around that was, is that in an effort to show more trailers or more commercials for products before your movies and everything? From a creative standpoint, I think I like shorter trailers. I like trailers that give less away. So I'd be happy to kind of work in whatever form
Yeah, that'd be great.
that will work. Sometimes we have a magic number of around like 206.
Yeah.
And it's like our perfect length for a trailer. So we might have to make some compromises to get it to two. But yeah, I'd be open to that. And
Help me on the Cameron Diaz question.
I haven't seen it.
You know what's funny is everybody asks me that because they're like, oh yeah, what do you do? Oh, like Cameron Diaz in The Holiday? And I recently saw that on the plane like a year ago. And no, it's not like that.
What does that mean? Because for all of us who are in the
She
dark.
has a very glamorous life.
Now you have this is a great advertisement. Now you have to go see The Holiday.
I know. I see it again. Okay. Gentleman in the front row has his hand up here.
Well, hello. If, let's say, in front of you, like, young filmmaker, and he just finished his first movie, what would be, like, 3 advice which you would say when he start working on the trailer for, like, his first movie? Like, do
Got
this,
it.
don't do this, do this.
Gotcha. Any advice to first-time filmmakers? I think any of the 3 of you want to take that.
Before distribution, it's a trailer to get distribution,
Yes.
trailer for festivals, and so you're doing it on your own. I'd say keep it short,
How short?
under 2 minutes.
I'd say under 30 seconds.
Yeah, keep it really short. Keep it very simple, whatever your film really boils down to. If there's just one scene even that plays for 30 seconds, that would actually be great for just your first time kind of showing it. I don't know, do you have other?
No, I think that's good. I mean, there's a number of different trailers for different uses. If you're selling your film internationally, you might have a sales team that it's asking you to put together more of a kind of trailer / kind of clip reel, and sometimes those actually can be longer, where people want to kind of see performances. If you're having your film play at a festival, they may request that you kind of put together a trailer. And again, maybe I would defer to say what Sohini said in terms of keeping something kind of short or nothing at all sometimes in advance of a film. It kind of just depends. So there are different trailers for different uses. I wouldn't really, if you don't have a deal in place, invest money in making a trailer. Sometimes we'll have filmmakers come and say, well, we're trying to sell our film and we just need a trailer. And I think, from a buyer's perspective, they still need to see your film and buy into that. And they'll remake the trailer, afterwards anyway.
Right.
Okay, someone pointing over here in the back, and then this woman here in the front. I'll take the you.
I'm a film student at the University of Texas at Austin, and I make fake trailers solely for the enjoyment of it, like the machete style thing. So I was wondering, is there like a universally known existing structure that you think a lot of people know about? Because I put Michael Kamen's piece from the Lethal Weapon trailer in my trailer on YouTube, and tons of people ask me about that. I mean, do you find that there's a structure that people kind of have in terms of like a trailer? I mean, do you avoid cliches like the slow-mo no scream, or?
We certainly try to avoid cliches and the stuff that we're working on. And again, it's because of the films that we're working on, which are very specific kind of visions. But yeah, in terms of the music, there's a lot of different pieces of music that you'll hear used in trailers over and over again.
Pola. Cigaros, Happy Pola. That's used over and over again.
Some of the music.
Life of David Gale.
There's a number of tracks.
Coldplay.
And sometimes it's just because those kind of cues just kind of work, that they evoke a certain emotion and response from people, and those have worked in the past, and sometimes people will gravitate towards those again. So yeah, there's certainly a lot of conventions and everything like that. Certainly years ago it was the in a world guy and the voice of God kind of thing, which I think you see a lot less of in trailers now. Sometimes you'll see trailers with lots of fades to black to kind of create kind of an intensity and things like that.
And the Inception.
And the Inception type of
Everyone
thing.
on
Hopefully
the
that's
end,
been
yeah.
played out. Yeah.
But you asked about structure. The conventional structure is a 3-act structure. First is story, second is conflict, third is, it's like a film. First is story, just introduction of characters, second is conflict, and third is some sort of resolution, and yet keeping it open-ended at the same time. But I think a lot of times we try not to go the 3-act structure. But that is the traditional kind of structure for.
What is the
trailers.
bumper at the end of trailers called? The like exclamation
button.
point. The button? Okay.
Buttons, yeah. Let's go to the gentleman in front of you and then the lady in the front row.
My question is actually very similar. You may have answered it, but it was in your years of experience, what principles about trailers have you learned? How do you make the decisions about which images, which music, et cetera?
Seems like a big question.
Yeah, it's funny. After all these years, I do go through a film and kind of break it down for, we're doing a form of short storytelling and trying to be really, economical about how we kind of lay out the story, introducing characters, introducing a little bit of the story, and then, the golden rule of don't give away the movie in the trailer, which not everyone always follows. But so it is about going. I go through the movie with an ear towards what are the things that can help tell me the story. What are those images, those kind of head turns, those moments, whether it's an action piece or what have you, and then start to work with music and start to kind of put that up against some of the images, and it all kind of is in a process of just kind of paring the thing down. Sometimes I'll have a version that's like 5 minutes, and then it's about, okay, I can tell this idea in a shorter form. Now it's 3 minutes, and it's just kind of a continued kind of sculpting away at it. Even in the Beast trailer that we looked at, I mean, we are doing, even though it's a very kind of much of a tone piece and a character piece, we are still kind of introducing you to this heroine, introducing you into the myth in this place. There is a turn that happens when this storm occurs in the middle of the trailer, and then we're trying to be kind of a little bit more open-ended and use reviews in the back end to kind of help tell you about you're being transported to this magical place and not sew things up at the end.
Do actors have any veto? They do. So another voice in the process could theoretically be an actor who has that.
Very rarely, but yes, actors do, and sometimes it's pending on cast, and sometimes if they're an EP on it, then they definitely have more say.
Okay. And lady in the front. There's a mic.
I'm wondering, when do you decide to put title cards instead of voiceover?
Title cards versus voiceover.
Mark loves to, he prefers to use cards, I think, first, because it keeps it just more mysterious than having voiceover. But sometimes voiceover is what you need.
I mean, one technique that we'll use or that we like to do is, and it's all just about trying to tell the information in a very kind of short, compact way, where, you might take 5 scenes of dialogue to kind of make a point that you can make kind of simply in a card. But sometimes there's been trailers as well where we've actually recorded maybe one of the main actors doing some voiceover that's not necessarily in the film, but that can kind of help give us a setup of an idea in a short form.
Royal Tenenbaums.
Yeah, right.
Royal Tenenbaums, Beautiful has voiceover that's not, it's a character voiceover, but it's not from the actual film. Beautiful, Alejandro's Inarritus.
I don't want to be against the folks in the back whose the lights are blinding me. If we can see, I see one hand up there, right there, the gentleman. Can you get him? And then we'll go to this lady next.
I'm a colorist, and I'm just curious if you're always working with the color that's going to be in the final release cinema version, or if you have an in-house colorist you work with, and do you sometimes change the look of the film to kind of match your theme that you're editing with, or if you kind of just make it more contrasty and saturated so it looks better on YouTube, or, I mean,
Sure.
like, can you talk a little bit about the different...
Love these technical questions.
Sure, yeah, we rarely have a finished film to work with. It rarely has music, it rarely has special effects. It's always a rough form, and certainly not final color that we're working with. So when that does, sometimes we're not often seeing the final color until it kind of comes to we have our locked cut of the trailer and there's a conform, and often the DP and the feature timer will be involved in looking at the trailer. And the main adjustments, I think, is we always kind of want to respect the original photography. But again, since we have kind of a different context of images lining up against one another that they didn't necessarily in the feature, there'll be a little bit of an evening out of things. So if we're kind of coming from a brighter shot to a little bit of a darker shot, there might be a little bit of an evening out. But otherwise, the idea is to respect the photography.
But you do a basic, with Beast and the other indie films you guys do, you are working with finished you're usually working with finished films, right? On the
Well,
smaller
in
film.
the case of your film, which was at Sundance and was completed and everything, then
I'm
yeah.
thinking of like the other IFC films, Simon Killer.
Sure. Yeah, it depends on what stage we kind of the film is in, and I would say most of the things that we're working on are in an unfinished
Locked
stage.
materials.
Yeah, unfinished actually.
Okay. And I promised the lady here with the. Is there a mic that could be gotten over to her? I think this will be our last question. Okay.
Hi.
Hi there.
Hi, my question is for Dan. Dan, we actually met about 3 years ago when I interviewed you via Skype for a project I was doing at Emily Carr. So hi. Hello. That was a long time ago. But my question is, at the time, I know you guys were working on pushing for the feature. How did the trailer for Glory at Sea, which is a short film, how did that change? And how did the marketing strategy change from that to Beasts of Southern Wild?
Well, it's a extremely limited question in terms of other people being interested, but I'm so honored you asked it. We made a short film before Beasts that's called Glory at Sea. And if there are any filmmakers out there, it's a whole nother conversation about how shorts can help features, but it's sort of not complicated. We ran out of money. We put together an unbelievable amount of credit card debt. We loved the arcade fire, and we just put the arcade fire over a bunch of the images of what we had shot. We needed money to finish the film. And what changed was, with Beasts, I mean, everything had changed because of the resources of our distributor. I think from a emotional or ideological point of view, we were very much not only anticipating, but ready to do it again. And it was sort of an outlier in terms of what happened with the movie once we premiered at Sundance. And the changes, we collaborated with Mark and Searchlight.
Thank you, and great to have you here, and thanks for taking the time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.